Invasions in Souls games suck, and I hate them. No, like, really, that's the driving force behind me making this video. It's half personal vendetta, half actual game design critique. Also, shout out to my friend Inve for getting me all the footage for this, because damn, $60 in 2022? This game came out 8 years ago! Invasions have always been one of the most contentious aspects of FromSoftware's Souls series, and yes, I'm going to be counting all of these as the same series, and let's be honest, you should too. Essentially, the invasions are supposed to act as a sort of balancing system, where if you use certain in-game features, a random other player can join your game and hunt you down. Now, there's two main problems with this as a system that we're going to be exploring today. First, a system like this is inherently unbalanced in its execution, and secondly, it's built in such a way that the vast majority of players don't want to play it, but are opted in anyway. This is a very strange practice that I've taken to calling unconsensual PvP, and this whole video is going to be about why game designers should not do this. Okay, quick history lesson. As I said before, invasions have always been a kind of balancing system that turns on if players engage with the game in a certain way that gives them a substantial advantage. In Dark Souls 1, a player's world is open to invasions as soon as they use a humanity, which is a resource typically used to kindle a bonfire, which then provides double healing items when players rest at it. In Dark Souls 3, there's a healing item that boosts your health and resistances, and it works really great as a last-ditch item to use if you're out of healing but can't get to a rest spot. These are incredibly core mechanics to how these games play. Bonfire kindling in Dark Souls 1 makes you feel like you're actually staking a path through a hostile world, making outposts along the way as needed. And Embers in Dark Souls 3 are a basic healing item, allowing you to tactically consume a limited resource for a health boost in a desperate situation, and that kind of adds a layer of depth to exploration. But for some reason, if you engage with either of these systems, you now have to face the possibility of PvP on top of the already existing PvE enemies. Here's where we talk about the unbalanced nature of invasions as a system, because, oh boy, if you need any proof that it's skewed, look at all the invader posts complaining about people closing their games as soon as the invader message pops up. Yeah, you heard that right. Huge amounts of players have historically quit out of their games just to avoid an invasion, losing all the momentum and all their immersion and completely taking them out of the experience. And can you blame them? Almost everyone buys these games for the PvE experience, those challenging but fair enemies, famously difficult bosses, all that stuff that Souls games are famous for. They're not buying the game for a competitive multiplayer experience, but they're forced into one anyway. Quick aside, there is an offline mode in these games, but it disables all online features, including messages left by players and bloodstains that show how they died. These little shared world features help the game's environments feel more alive, and they've always been a staple of Souls games because it's just fun to sleuth out how someone died and maybe avoid that fate yourself, or to take some random person's advice and find a secret path that you wouldn't find otherwise. People love these features. Simply using an offline mode isn't a solution because you miss out on so much of what makes Souls games Souls games. Anyways, back on topic, there's a lot of fundamental problems with invasions, even aside from the forced nature of them. For starters, experience fighting PvE enemies does not transfer over to PvP, since players fight very differently from normal AI enemies. They move more unpredictably, they have faster attacks that are harder to read, and most importantly, they usually roll up with some weird-ass weapon art or magic spell that can stun you really hard, take a huge chunk off your health, and basically end the fight instantly if you don't know what the attack is. And trust me, new players won't know what it is, or how to counter it. Hell, the simple mechanic of parrying is extremely difficult for new players to perform, and it's never taught to you at all. And it's even harder to adapt to on the receiving end, because experienced players can use it to easily almost one-shot their victims. The problem is just compounded by the fact that invaders can team up with the world's usual enemies, and can ambush unsuspecting players who are already struggling to explore an unfamiliar environment. It's just a system that is overtly hostile to new players, plain and simple. But there's another issue, one that lies in the very nature of how invaders queue up for their harassment activity. See, they have to actually go through an involved process of exploration and maybe even a quest line to even get access to the item needed to invade another player's world. And if they want to do it consistently, there's even more work required. That means that at a baseline level, an invader is going to have a substantial amount of competence with the game, guaranteed. The same can't be said for a brand new player who just popped a healing item while exploring, and who now has to contend with a very human threat while they're still learning the game's controls. And hell, it's so easy to make a new character, so someone with triple-digit hours can easily cheese the system to fight against brand new players, making the skill imbalance so much worse. And then, of course, we've got the unconsensual nature of the invasions themselves. For a long time, FromSoft's bootlickers have tried to argue that using these items is the consent, but that's just nonsensical, honestly. Wanting to heal does not mean someone wants to play PvP. It's literally an entirely different style of play. Why would wanting to simply engage with the game's mechanics mean that I want to fight human players? The whole gameplay loop of invasions is entirely predicated on preying on unsuspecting players who are just wanting to play the game they bought. Every single aspect of this system enables experienced players to harass new players, often with the express purpose of ruining their playthrough, just because it's easy wins. There are some players who are okay with invasions. I'd never be stupid enough to try to say otherwise. But those players don't matter to this discussion. Their experiences aren't being ruined by an invader, they're not closing their games at the first sight of an invasion message. But new players are. New players have been suffering for years at the hands of this system, forced to either endure it or just not engage with a lot of the game's best mechanics, and that is not a solution. And at the end of the day, I think it's pretty fair to say most people don't want to be invaded. If someone wants to PvP, there's duels that are incredibly easy to set up and get into. And most importantly, everyone playing them actually wants to fight other players. There's no dashboarding, there's community rules, like throwing away all your healing. It's surprisingly formal and honorable. This is why people have been asking for an invasion opt-out toggle for years at this point. PvPers already have a way to play their desired mode with duels, and being able to opt out of invasions would mean that those invasions would be more closely balanced, since the easy prey would be removed from the pool of potential invasion targets. Personally, I think locking invasions behind New Game Plus is a great solution too, ensuring everyone has a good amount of gameplay expertise while simultaneously spicing up new playthroughs of the game. But neither of these options work in practice, because invasions would probably die without their unwillingly conscripted player base. The invasion system only survives because players are dishonestly opted into it, forced into a mode of play they don't want to be in. But let's talk about Elden Ring, finally. Invaders have been substantially weakened in terms of their damage output and general stats, gear and level restrictions are tighter to hopefully ensure more even fights, and most of all, they can only invade when the host is playing co-op, meaning they'll always be outnumbered unless the host specifically uses separate additional items to trigger invasions while solo, or to summon more invaders. Gone are the days where solo players get preyed upon just because they used a healing item, and honestly, that's a good thing. A lot of the previous issues with invasions have been solved with these changes, but one massive problem still remains. Wanting to play with friends does not equal wanting to fight other players. People in co-op just want to explore together with their buddies. They don't want to have to deal with some rando waiting in ambush around a corner somewhere. What's weirder is that getting invaded solo is a whole process. You need an item that you can only get from a pretty tough optional boss that most experienced players will end up skipping on subsequent playthroughs since it's so out of the way. That means that pro gamers who are on New Game Plus 32 usually skip the NPC that drops the Taunter's Tongue, and they're just not in the invasion pool at all, meaning that the chances of casual co-op groups getting invaded are higher. And of course, the skill discrepancy from the previous games is still there, because you still have to go through a journey to get the invasion items, and a full questline to get infinite use variations of them. With how different PvP combat is from PvE, and the wide selection of weird-ass weapons in Elden Ring, invaders can still pretty easily pull a win from experience alone, even against multiple players. And new characters are really easy to make too, so the potential for smurfing is still really high. But hey, that's admittedly a lot of steps forward. God knows the balance changes did a lot to dissuade invasions on the attacker side, since they often just get dumpstered if they're not prepared to take two guys at once. Wink. Maybe, just maybe, it'll be enough to make the system less obnoxious, so people won't force close their games upon being invaded. But was it enough? Stay with me, Recently, Elden Ring's wonderful modding community came out with a seamless co-op client that makes sweeping changes to how multiplayer works in the game. You're not barred from entering new areas with your friends anymore. Anyone can summon their horse, everyone can sit at bonfires, teammates don't get kicked out of the world when they die, and invasions are disabled. Along with all of the other quality of life improvements it provides, this mod serves as the final answer to FromSoft's refusal to add an opt-out option for invasions. Because now, if you want to opt out, you can just play seamless co-op. There's an option for everybody. Solo players who want invasions can opt into them by using the Taunter's Tongue, but solo players who don't want to deal with them don't have to, because that's how the game works by default. And co-op players can opt out of invasions by using seamless co-op, thanks to modders. FromSoftware's insistence on implementing anti-player design in regards to multiplayer finally came back to bite them because they drove their player base away when modders showed them up. The community, the players, know what they want, and we're finally at a point where they're ready and willing to take matters into their own hands. Oh, it's been a decade and multiplayer is still needlessly convoluted and limited? Fine.
I'll do it myself.
And this ability for players to finally choose how they want to experience PvP has actually been way better for the game, since the people remaining on the original client, engaging with the invasion system, all want to play it. They're not being forced. They're choosing to play that way, opening their worlds to the occasional invader not because they wanted to simply play with friends, but because they wanted invasions specifically. Otherwise, they'd be using seamless co-op. And this begs the question, why was the invasion system kept and re-implemented as a feature for over a decade? People have been asking for this kind of freedom and agency since day one, and those requests have only gotten more and more popular over the years. Invasions aren't completely dead, but they're not alive either. The big draw of easy prey is gone, and honestly, it's just easier and more efficient to just set up dueling signs instead. Now, everyone who wants to play PvP is just doing duels, and everyone else is just enjoying the game on their own terms. It kind of speaks for itself. A system that most players responded to by Alt F4ing isn't good. It never was. People just put up with it because there wasn't an alternative. Despite that being obvious from the outset, people still chose to defend it for years because it's just how the series is. It's a deliberate decision, it's the artist's vision, it doesn't matter. That's just defending tradition for no concrete reason other than it's the way things have always been. And God, at this point it should be clear that that's not a good measurement of quality. Like, come on guys, what are we, the Republican Party? Or the Democratic Party talking about the Republican Party? At the end of the day, there's two takeaways. First, if the majority of people engaging with a game's system don't want to be doing that, chances are it's a bad system and the game would be better off without it. Secondly, if someone's enjoyment of something comes purely from deriving others of fun, cough cough, invaders, their opinion isn't valid and shouldn't even be considered. In these discussions, the people that matter are the victims, not the bystanders or the attackers. The most vulnerable people should dictate the discussion and what changes get made, but Souls games have never rolled that way, I guess, and neither do their fans. Wow, dude, this video took far too long to make. I know it's short, but this was kind of whipped up on a whim because I realized my next big video, with the working title, No Half Measures, Every Game Should Have an Easy Mode. It's a little pretentious, but it's gonna be way denser and longer than the FNF vid. So I wanted to put something out for you guys in the meantime, so here it is, sort of a smaller project. But don't worry, I'm hard at work on the big one. I'm focusing on improving my work ethic and productivity to get more videos out to you guys faster, with less months of downtime. Sorry about that. Anyways, I've got another interim essay in the works to tide you over until the big project, so in the meantime, join my community Discord to keep up with news on that, as well as news on my stream schedules. Yeah, I stream 4 times a week over at twitch.tv/Cyben_X, and you guys are always welcome to stop in and ask me any questions about my opinions, video stuff, or whatever, you know? Anyways, I've got a Twitter too, I guess. And I recently set up a Patreon, so check that if you want some bonus content for these videos. There's like director's commentaries and script drafts on there. Just a lot of unused cool stuff, because damn do these things take a lot of work to produce. But yeah, right now, if you're looking to support me, the best way to do that is through the Patreon link in the description, or Twitch subs, or straight donations through my tip link. All of this stuff is in the description if you want to look at it, or you can just check my link tree, which is also down there. Anyways, that's it for me for now, but get ready, because I promise in the next video...